us from the UK. It's 7 o'clock there, 1 o'clock in the afternoon here in Iowa. So those of you who are not familiar with us, Swamp Fox Bookstore is located in Marion, Iowa, which is in east central Iowa. We are a small, independent, women-owned bookstore specializing in general fiction, children's, and teen books. And we're able to special order just about anything that's still in print. And we are excited to be joined today by Janice, who is celebrating. This is trippy. She's celebrating the release of her third book in the UK, her second book here in the States. And she's a former magazine editor, an award-winning journalist, and government communications writer. She wrote articles and speeches for, among others, the Cabinet Office, Home Office, and the Department for International Development. Her enthusiasm for travel has taken her around the world several times, which we're sure to ask her about today, from Madagascar to the Galapagos, Guatemala to Zimbabwe, Japan, Russia, and South Korea. A playwright and a screenwriter, she penned the feminist Shakespeare stage comedy Nether Bard and co-wrote the feature film Retreat. She lives in London and is the author of The Appeal, which came out last year here in the States, and the Twyford Code, which is out today and available from us or your favorite independent bookseller. So welcome, Janice.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
So let's get started. What is a day in the life of Janice, the author, look like?
Well, I know that mostly people think creative people are very disorganized and chaotic, but I'm the exact opposite. I have a really strict routine and a very regimented day, so I can tell you my day down to the hour. I rise at 6:40. I go swimming. I'm at the pool by 7. I'm at my desk by 8:30 at the latest, and I work really intensely on my main project until about 1 o'clock. Then I have lunch, and for 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon, I'll work on doing work that's less intense. Now, that could be anything from answering questions for a magazine, or it could be editing, or it could be going through a script that I've written and I'm reading through it to see how it sounds. So anything that's less intense. And then I clock off about 4 or 5 o'clock, and my evening begins in front of the telly usually. So yeah, my I've got two kind of working forms. The really intense where I'm generating new text and working on a new idea, and the lighter stuff that's a bit more airy and less intense. Difficult to describe it, but I think if you're a writer, any writers listening to us today, they might identify with that.
So what do you enjoy watching? Since you said you kind of have some time blocked off for watching the telly, what are some of your favorite shows to watch?
Oh my goodness! I mean, quite eclectic. I'll watch drama, crime drama is a favourite. True crime, really big fan of true crime. Um, and there's some great stuff coming up, on true crime, and is up there at the moment. So I've really been enjoying that. Other than that, comedies. I'm quite open-minded. I'll give anything a go. Try anything once.
Awesome. So, according to your bio that I just read, you have had a career in writing. How or when did you know that that's what you wanted to do for a living?
Pretty much at the age of about 6, when I realised how words fitted together. When you're a child and they teach you that words are little groups of other words and little sections, little syllables, I suppose,
Mhm.
and that's how you learn words or learn how sentences are fitted together. And when I learned that, I had this moment where I thought, this is my medium. This is how I communicate. Because I was a really shy, quiet child, and I found it very hard to find my actual voice. And this continued, and right up into adulthood, by the way, not just as a child. But as a child, I realised that writing would be my interface with the world. Really, really young.
That's awesome. We've met so many authors that started at a young age writing. Is there a teacher that really inspired you or encouraged you along the way?
Yeah, I mean, my high school English teacher, Mr. Jones, hi, Gareth Jones, if you're watching. Yeah, he was really inspirational. And I think English teachers introduce you to books. Certainly me, my parents never read. There were no books in the house. So I relied on school. I didn't realise it at the time, but I was relying on school to recommend reading for me. So that was really, really important part of literary development. The school, it was for me anyway. So yeah,
It's
hi, Mr.
interesting
Jones.
because in the second book, the teacher in the book does the same thing for the main character, Smith.
Absolutely. I mean, the Twyford Code, one of its themes, a big theme of literacy, and particularly in children. Because being as literate as I've been since the age of about 6, I've always had one eye on people who don't have access to that wonderful world of books and stories that have given me so much over my life. And I think that was always in my mind. And when the character of Smithy came up, the main character in this book, I mean, he's someone who hasn't had access to literacy. He's been illiterate for the vast majority of his life. And I've looked at the world through his eyes. And that's been, I mean, it's been awful, but it's been awesome as well. It's been quite an education.
Yes, it was quite interesting to learn about him. So let's talk a little bit about the book. So, what is the Twyford Code about?
The Twyford Code? Well, it's it's a mysterious, twisting adventure, I would say, and it's told to us by this character, Stephen Smith, who's been illiterate for most of his life, and he's only just learned how to read. Now, he learned how to read in prison because he's just done a long stretch, and he's back out and he's trying to go straight. And his probation officer suggests that he looks into something, a sort of a moment of trauma in his early teenage years. And she suggests he looks into this and gets to the bottom of it once and for all, and that will keep him occupied, when he's not at work. So she's got, a dual, agenda there. So Smithy sets about looking into the disappearance of his English teacher. Now, he and his remedial English class went for a school trip to the coast, the south coast of England, to Bournemouth, and his teacher never came back. She abandoned them, or for some reason she left them on the shore. And he has a great deal of trauma around this event in his life, but he doesn't really remember it properly, as is the nature of childhood trauma. So Steve goes back and looks up his old classmates to try and find out what really went on that day. And he discovers through, meeting up with them and asking them, that his teacher had, just before she disappeared, become convinced that a disgraced children's author called Edith Twyford had actually hidden secret messages in her books. And now, she was writing in the 1940s when there was a lot happening here in Europe. And Smithy becomes convinced that Miss Isles, his teacher, disappeared because of what she discovered about that. And he sets off to discover for himself what that might have been. But because he can't read or write properly, he can only just read, can't write at all, he has to keep a record of this investigation in the form of audio files that he speaks into his phone. So what we're reading in this book is a transcription of those audio files, because the phone has been found and we have to work out what's happened to Smithy. And that's all
So,
I can say about that.
so you have a unique narrative style in both the books. In The
Mhm.
Appeal, it's told in like emails and text messages, and then in the Twyford Code, it's obviously told by transcripts from a recording. Both are unique. You put the reader in the seat of the detective, the amateur detective. So I tell people when I've handed them or talked to them about The Appeal is that you are in the role of the detective, or the lawyers in this case, in the first book in that case, trying to put the pieces together. You don't have somebody guiding you through the story like you do in some more traditional novels. So
Mhm.
how did you decide to use these different narrative formats?
Well, it's all been accidental. I mean, with the first novel, I just sat down and wrote this idea. I had been writing scripts, and I think this is a bit of a clue to where it came from. I've been writing scripts for TV, hadn't really been getting anywhere, but I had a mentor who was assistant head of drama at Sky at the time, and he suggested, when I asked him how to get my ideas out there, he suggested I write a novel instead of writing another spec script. So, thinking this is a mad suggestion, I then thought a bit more and thought, well, maybe it's not that crazy. Maybe that is quite a good idea, because, I've been trying the same thing and getting the same results, and I'm not getting anywhere. So I'll write a novel. So I closed down the script I was working on, but took the same idea and started the novel. Now, a script is mainly dialogue.
Mhm.
And when you look at the appeal, although it's emails and text messages, it is mainly people talking to each other, and we're overhearing them. We're eavesdropping on their conversations. So what happened quite accidentally turned into one of the most amazing aspects of the book that I'm really proud of now, because I never gave it a moment's thought. I just thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if this story was told via emails going back and forth between the minor characters? That would be great. Um, didn't think about it at all, but no, I'm so pleased I did now.
So did that affect the way the stories are told? Did that affect your writing process? I know some, and maybe you're neither. So I know some writers are pantsers. They kind of write by the seat of their pants for people not familiar with that. Or they really plot it out. They're plotters. Did the way these are structured, this different narrative style, did that affect your writing process?
I'm a pantser. Totally a pantser. I find if I try and write or try and plot in advance, it doesn't really work. For one, it takes the joy out of the writing process for me, and for another, I tend to think best when I'm in the flow of writing. Like I'm a bit like a shark. I have to be swimming forwards all the time, so I have to be writing in order to get those ideas. So I just set off on that first draft and just write without planning a thing, only having a vague idea in my head. Sometimes only just a title. Um, and then I'll plot in retrospect. I'll reverse engineer things, and I know this because for my fourth book, I'm at the stage now. I'm at the end of my first draft, and I finally know what it's about, so I can go back and alter that beginning to match the end. And that's what I've done with all of them. All of
Cool.
these books have they've evolved really. It's been very organic in how they were created.
So we have a question here from Rebecca. And she says, I really enjoyed the style of the appeal. I'm curious about how much of your writing is based on your own experiences, not the murders, of course. I mean, unless,
No, not the
but the
most.
settings, because I know you have experience in TV and stage work. So,
Yeah, I mean, I've done amateur drama, or I did anyway, from the age of about 12, 13, until I was in my mid-30s when the amateur drama group I belonged to ceased to exist. So yeah, amateur drama has been the mainstay of my social life for most of my adult life, and certainly my teenage years as well. I met my husband there. My best friends in the world were there, most of them, and yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful hobby. I mean, I think it gets a bit of a bad rap because um, there's we have this particular idea about what an amateur drama group is and who the people are who do it, but really, it's the most wonderful hobby to work together with a group of friends to put on a performance for an audience. There's nothing like it, but passions and emotions can run very high. So, there's always the sort of opportunity for tension and conflict and all these things that make life interesting and make drama interesting. So it was really ripe for me to write about, I think. But yeah, that totally informed the appeal anyway. Now the Twyford Code is quite different because there's very little on the surface in common between me and Steve. Absolutely nothing. But thinking about it, I think through him, he literally flowed out of me, this character. I could hear his voice, I could see him, I could feel him. He was so real to me while I was writing it. And I think Smithy is a kind of negative version of me. He's a reflection. He's perhaps who I might have been had I not had that great introduction to literature and writing and words when I was a child. And had I had his background, I think I was looking into a black mirror with Steve and seeing perhaps a road, thankfully, not taken. Um, so yeah, because there's nothing about the two of us that um, is similar, and yet I feel we're one and the same. It's weird.
I know they often say that characters are a reflection of some aspect of the person that creates them.
Mhm.
So, no matter how dark or light they might be. So thank you for that question, Rebecca. If anyone else has any questions for Janice, please feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll push them over and we'll talk about them. We'd love to hear more from the people that are in audience. So thank you. So I know from your bio too, you have traveled quite extensively. Can you share a tale or two from your travels?
Oh my goodness, I'll be here all night. Yeah, I have travelled. No, I've been almost, I say almost everywhere, and then people normally reel off countries that I haven't been to, so I won't say I've been almost everywhere. But I've been to some really interesting places and unusual places. South Korea was one, really interesting. The Galapagos Islands, which is an unusual place for us here in the UK to visit. It's a little bit nearer for you, so maybe not as unusual for an American audience to visit. But I would say that the place that surprised me the most was Madagascar, um, world's fourth largest island off the coast of Africa. And I went there because I was really interested in the wildlife. I wanted to see lemurs. I really wanted to see a giraffe beetle, which, if you do a Google search for that, you'll see why I wanted to see it. It's just an unbelievable creature, and I did see it, and it was unbelievable. But I might have gone there for the wildlife, but it was the people that really struck me, and they were the things that I think about now when I think about Madagascar. It's the way of life there, the people's spirituality, their connection to nature and the environment. Um, Really an incredible experience to see people who live a completely different life to you, but equally fulfilled. So yeah, Madagascar, if you get to go there, fabulous. Take the chance.
Sounds like amazing. I've seen a lot of documentaries about Madagascar and the wildlife there, especially the lemurs, because there's so many different kinds of lemurs.
Yeah, from teeny tiny little ones the size of my thumb to ones that's almost as big as me. Yeah, the huge, huge great lemurs. Just you can't you couldn't make them up. Yeah.
So the group at Grand Living says, "Tell us how you chose your publisher. Like, how did that deal come about for your books? How does that
Oh,
work with?"
hello, Grand Living. How did my publishing deal come about? Well, quite convolutedly, because I'd been, as I said, trying to get into TV. So I had a screenwriting agent, and I'd been with her about 5 years. And to be honest, I wasn't getting very far. I was certainly writing a lot of scripts, but not having any of them made, and it was really frustrating. It was suggested to me to write a novel, which I did without any commission, without any deadline, without any expectation from anyone. My agent said she'd happily read it after I'd written it. So I went away and spent a year writing the novel. Now, when she read it and said that, yeah, she thinks it is good enough to, try and find a publisher, she then passed it to her fellow agent at the same agency. I'm lucky that my agency represents both screenwriters and novelists, which isn't the case with all of them. But luckily, that book was passed across desks to get to my novel agent, my book agent now, and she read it and she agreed. Both of those agents gave me some notes to improve it, which I implemented. And then Gaia, my book agent, just put it out in the world to publishers. And there were a few that were interested. But Viper Books here in the UK, and they were quite new. They were at the time a new imprint of an established indie. And they were really interested in what they were doing. So they seemed like a really good bet. When it's a gut feeling, they
Yes.
feel like they understand you and they know you. It was that, and that's I'd like to go with my gut with people, and that's how I approach seeking a publisher, really. And I haven't been disappointed by my gut decisions ever. So
That's good.
that was all that. Thank you, and thank you for the question. Really interesting one.
So does that publisher then work to find some publisher here in the States, because these are published by a different publisher here in the state than what you have in
Yes.
the UK?
Yeah, exactly the same. The same process. My agent in London will then approach publishers in America, and same process. Exactly. It was the Atria imprint of Simon and Schuster in America, and again, gut feeling. These were really great people, and you look at what they've published. Excellent books. I'd love to be alongside those authors and those titles. Yeah, fabulous. I mean, I've been so lucky with my publishers that they're so supportive, and my editors here and in the States are just wonderful people. And they just know they know their stuff, because when you've written something, you absolutely can't see what's right or wrong about it. When I've been spending 7 months with a text that I've been writing every single day, I don't know whether it's good or bad or what's good or bad about it. and that's where your editor comes in, and they're so valuable. They're like having another brain alongside your own. It's fabulous.
Helping to bring your world to light.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, bring the world to light, and to bridge between the writer and the reader,
Mhm.
really, to tighten things up. They're really good at spotting where there's a weak spot in a manuscript, and you can tighten that up. So yeah, after an editor has been in a script, it's so much better than before, really.
So knowing that you have worked on scripts and on TV, do you think, or even play, do you think either of these, you would adapt either of these for play or television or for a movie?
Play, I don't know. My goodness. Well, I haven't done any playwriting for quite a while, so I'd be quite rusty. I mean, I'd never rule anything out. Don't get me wrong. Um, I would love to see it. I'd love to see it on the stage. But screen, they've both been optioned. The Appeal is optioned by ABC in America. Twyford Code is it's about to be announced, the option for that. So I can't say who it is, but
Okay.
yeah, it has.
Well, I'll keep an eye on news.
Keep an eye out; it will be announced. So yeah, I mean, I'm writing the pilots for those, which is amazing to bring these stories that are successful as novels and go back to where I started writing fiction as scripts. It's wonderful to think of the idea translated through the screen, because they're both different languages. Screen, film, and TV are one particular language, and books are another language. And you can tell the same story, but it's like a translation, really,
It is.
literally a translation from one medium to the next.
Anybody that's read a movie, seen a TV show adapted from a book, knows exactly how that works. I could see either of them on Masterpiece Theater here in the States.
Fabulous.
My husband and I are watching All Creatures Great and Small right now every Sunday here.
Lovely. Oh, wow. Nice.
So Grand Living has another question. They want to know, who is your favorite novelist, or maybe you have more than one.
Oh, my goodness. My favourite novelist. I would have to say, towards the top is Thomas Hardy. I really love his novels. I mean, they're not some always laugh a minute, I have to say, but they're just amazing. And they're kind of a snapshot of life in a way now, way bygone era. And I think one thing I do like about Thomas Hardy is the fact he does focus on the grim part of life. And when people say, "Do you read any?" Some people read happy books when they're miserable in order to cheer them up. I don't. I read more miserable books, and that somehow cheers me up. I don't know, because my life is never going to be as bad as Tessa the D'Urberville's life or Bathsheba Everdeen. No, I'm never going to have a bad life like that, or as hard a life as those people have. So Thomas Hardy cheers me up. I'm confessing it here now. Other novelists, now who do I like? Cara Hunter. She's in the same sort of genre as me, the contemporary crime fiction. She's a really great writer, and I love her stories. I'm actually very privileged because I'm reading her next book before it's out. And this is one of the great things about being a published novelist. You do get to read things before they're published, and I love that. Cara Hunter, Murder in the Family. I'm really enjoying that one.
The only problem is that when that happens and it's really, really good and you're a really big fan, is that there's hardly anybody to talk about it.
I know, and you can't really say. You can't.
No?
Yeah, yeah, I know. And then it's ages before everybody else has read it, and you can talk about it. Yeah.
One of my favorite authors is Kate Morton, who does her books are always mystery, family, saga type stories, and I got an advanced reader copy of her book that doesn't come out till April, and so I've got like all this pent up energy about the book because it is so fantastic. We've been waiting 5 years for this book, and now there's like nobody to talk to about it.
Wow.
So Rebecca has another question. She says, "Do you find it difficult to pass along a manuscript, to stop touching and rereading it? Do the characters live alongside you in a way that causes you to rethink or reimagine what happens to them?"
Yeah. They do stay with me. Yeah, definitely they do. Well, certain characters from each book do. I wouldn't say all of them do from each book, and maybe it's the ones that I identify with more, like Steve from the Twyford Code. Absolutely. I mean, I think he's with me all the time. From the Appeal, I would say the three female characters in that, the three main ones, Izzy for sure, Sarah Jane, and Sam. They're like a three parts of me, those three characters, and they're always with me. And in my third book, which is just published here in the UK, Amanda Bailey, she's a true crime author in that book, and she's very close to me. So yeah, there's certain characters will stay with me. What was the first part of your question, Rebecca? What's that?
She says, "Do you find it difficult to pass along a manuscript to stop touching it or rereading sections?"
I have, again, I go with my gut. I will keep on and on going through it. When I get to the end, I go to the beginning and start going through again, almost like I'm combing out problems from it each time I go through. And there's a moment when I know it's ready to go, ready to go back to my editor. And it's kind of, I don't know what it is, but I kind of know that there's no more here I can do without the editor seeing it and without some feedback. And there's a moment, and then I almost can't do any more. I have to then send it off. So again, a gut feeling about it is what I go on.
So obviously, we here in the States gonna enjoy the Twyford Code for a few months. What is the third book that's coming out? What do we have to look forward to that the readers in the UK have already got access to?
Yeah, they've just got access to it. It's The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels, and that's about two true crime authors, Amanda and her nemesis Oliver, and they're both racing each other to a key interviewee. Now, this interviewee was a baby 18 years ago when they were involved in a crime, a historical crime now. But because they're now 18, they can be interviewed as an adult. So these two true crime authors are at loggerheads to try and reach it. And again, it's not quite as straightforward a narrative as you might think from a normal book. But it does follow on from my two. It's what we're reading is Amanda's research material. So we're reading all of her emails and her WhatsApps, her notes, transcriptions of her interviews with key witnesses. So we're reading all this material for her book, but there isn't a book. We're just reading the material. So we have to wonder why that is. And
Mm.
at the beginning, we know this material has come from a safe deposit box, and we've got to make a decision whether to put it all back at the end or to take it to the police. So again, we've got this active role. Us as reader have an active role in that one too. So I'm continuing the theme really of the Twyford Code and the Appeal, in that the reader is immersed in the story and they play an active role.
The nice thing I like about each one of your books is they're standalones.
Yeah.
They've got a similar, a new, intriguing take on the mystery, putting the reader in that active participant role. But you can read them in any order that you want,
Yep.
and I think that's awesome because sometimes you get stuck in a series, right? And
You don't know which is the first one.
yeah.
You have to find out which one came first so that you don't, miss anything or come in the middle. Yeah. No, they're all standalone.
So I have a question. You obviously have a love for theater, and the appeal centers around that. And you said that you were active in community theater for a while. What's your favorite play or musical? Have you performed in or seen it multiple
Oh,
times?
there's
I'm a
so
theater
many.
junkie myself, so
I'll tell my favourite play that I performed in was Blithe Spirit by
oh
Noel
yes, that's
Coward.
a good
That's
one.
actually mentioned quite a lot in the Appeal. As I think in the Appeal, it was the last play they did, so they're talking about it a lot, the last play. And I was Elvira, which is the ghost in Blithe Spirit. It's probably the biggest part I ever had in my whole career, and I just loved it. And I love that play. But musicals, I absolutely adore them. And I love musicals that are musicals, so you'd think they're quite happy and cheerful, but they're really dark. And they can be anything from Cabaret, great one, love that, Chicago, Fiddler on the Roof, um, even Little Shop of Horrors.
Yes.
It's just very kitsch, but it's really dark as well. I just love music and darkness together. It's just wonderful. I love a good musical.
I was in Fiddler on the Roof in high school, and I was grandmother's idol, so I played a ghost as well.
Wow! Well, it's a sign, isn't it? So we've both been ghosts.
Yes. So one of the questions I love asking authors on these events is, what is one thing you wish people would ask you about? And would you like to share the answer to that thing that you want to share about? We
Yeah,
don't normally get asked about.
I would like to be asked, how did lockdown affect your writing?
Oh, so how did lockdown affect your writing?
Oh, it's so great that you asked that, Terry. Thank you. Well, I wrote the Twyford Code entirely in lockdown, and it meant that I was really focused because there was no outside noise at all. I didn't have to do anything or go anywhere or be anywhere, and I could really focus on what I had to do because this is a book about secret codes in a children's book. So someone had to do those codes, and that was me. So I had a lot of things that I had to focus on for this book, and lockdown gave me the opportunity and the time and the space to do it. So
So
Twyford
you
Code is my
created all
lockdown.
of the codes that we read about in the novel.
Yep.
Wow. Even more impressed now. That's awesome. So are there any children's authors that have hidden things? Or did that just idea come out of where
It
that
came
book
up. Yeah,
originally published from?
they haven't. No, they haven't hidden things to my knowledge. But Edith Twyford, the disgraced children's author in this novel, is really based very closely on Enid Blyton, who was a huge part of my childhood reading. I told you before there was no books in my house when I was growing up, but I would get books from the local jumble sale that my mum would help out at the local scout group, and they'd hold jumbles, and I would hoover up the books that people were throwing away. And in the 1970s, people were throwing away their Enid Blyton books because they were so out of favour and out of fashion. And I took them home and I read them cover to cover many, many times. And I credit Enid Blyton with giving me a sensibility to be a writer, to giving particularly rhythm. Rhythm is a really important thing when you're a writer. And Enid Blyton had fabulous rhythm to her prose. And so I hope I picked that up, and I owe that to her and her alone.
Awesome. I could picture the covers, like, I see, it's a fictional book that, Stephen finds, but I could picture some of the books that it was probably those illustrations would have been based on books that my parents had and had given me over the years. It was, you did a wonderful job painting what that fictional book would have looked, or those fictional books would have looked like. Are there any other questions from anybody that we have online? Just want to make sure, because we're kind of coming towards the end of our conversation here. I want to make sure if anybody has any other questions, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat. And Grand Living took one of my final questions that I always ask. So I won't ask you what your favorite book is. We sort of talked about your favorite books and your favorite author already. So um, what profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt? Now, I know that you've done screenwriting and playwriting and all this other kind of stuff, but what other profession would you like to try?
Do you know, I would like to be a postal deliverer because I think you'd get up early every day, which I do anyway, and
Oh,
you'd see some wonderful mornings. Wouldn't that be wonderful to see the
oh
sun come up
yes.
every morning? You'd get loads of exercise and you'd finish early, so you'd have the rest of the day to yourself. And I quite like the I used to deliver leaflets as one of the jobs I've done in my time. And it's something quite therapeutic about going up and down every driveway, putting leaflets into every door. I think I could do that. I think that would be quite chilled. I'd like to be a postal deliverer.
During the pandemic, we started a local delivery with the bookstore, which is something bookstores
Oh.
had never really considered doing before, but it was a way for us to get people books safely. And I still get great joy of dropping off books at people's houses. It's really kind of, I don't know, just knowing that they're going to walk out and get the book that they wanted, or we have a subscription program where you can for a certain number of months, we'll deliver books to you. We pick them out for you based on your interest. And last week I got to drop some off to two little boys. It was their birthday. So when I walked to the house, they weren't home yet, but I could see that there were balloons and a happy birthday banner
Oh,
inside the home when I hung the stuff on the door. So knowing that they were to come home and have books for their birthday, it just, made me very excited. So I
oh,
understand
wow.
that.
That's so lovely, isn't it? That's another thing about delivering post. You're bringing good news as well as bills.
There's just that. Yeah. So Rebecca had another question. She said she's just curious why it takes so long for your books to get released in the United States. She's having a family member bring back Alberton Angels when he travels back from the UK next year. It seems a year
Wow.
seems a
Oh,
long time. Lucky you, Rebecca.
yeah. I hope you enjoy it when you get it, when he brings it back on the plane. Why does it take so long? It's a quirk of publishing. It's a quirk of when I got my deals, various sides of the Atlantic. I'm trying to think now, did lockdown and COVID have a role in the delay? It may have done, actually, thinking about it. So yeah, it
Yeah,
may have been COVID that stopped that. But yeah, it's a quirk of publishing. Um, one of those things.
and Kate has a great question. This is similar to the question I asked you earlier, since it's a release day for your book today. What was the first thing you bought or indulged in with your book earnings?
Um, well, do you know, I didn't have an e-reader. Just hadn't gone there. As a physical book is my joy, really. I love books so much. So I hadn't got a Kindle. So I've recently got a Kindle. So that's my great indulgence since then, and I'm getting used to it, I think. I mean, it's not the same, I
No.
would say, but it's much more convenient in terms of storage.
It is. It is. As we can see from both our backgrounds, this is just, I'm assuming, a portion of the books that
Oh,
you
yeah,
own
the
as
fraction.
well.
Yeah. I've got books all over the floor, that's what you can't see. It's as well.
We have one of our book clubs coming up next week. We do a What You Reading book club, and we give away ARCs, the advanced reader copies, because there's only three of
Mhm,
us that work at the store, and so we can't get through them all. So this
mhm,
book club would give those away. So I've got them scattered all over right now as I go through them and determine which ones we need to take and which ones are. It's a few months yet that we can hang on to them. So I understand having books everywhere.
mhm. Oh, yeah.
Great question, Kate. So, are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker?
Tea drinker all the way.
What kind of tea is your favorite tea?
English breakfast, and
Are
I
you
tend to have it, well, morning or afternoon. So even though it's called breakfast, because 'cause I'm a bit of a rebel.
Are you a dog person or a cat person?
If I had to choose, I'd say dog, but if I'm honest, I'm more a reptile and bird person.
Oh wow, you might be the first person I've come across that is a reptile or bird person. There's one of our good friends around here that's a writer. She has birds. She's always posting about them on her Instagram account. They're so lovely to watch. Kind of amazing. She's rescued them all, I believe.
Oh, wow.
So this question is one of my favorite questions to ask too, because it gets you thinking. And I actually asked this question to an author in one of our first virtual events we did, and he didn't know the answer. And then his wife happened to be in the chat and answered for him. So when you put the toilet paper on the dispenser, do you put the so it rolls over or under?
Over. Heaven forbid if you put it under. Really, I mean, I've had to drum that into my husband. It's over. It's never under.
And we've talked about books. You prefer the physical books, but are getting used
Yeah.
to the electronic. You'll be able to read a lot more advanced reader copies with an electronic reader, I've learned.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah, and they won't pile up on the floor, which is a
The
good
problem
thing.
is they're on the e-reader, so it means they're out of sight, out of mind. That's the one thing I've learned about having an e-reader. I'm like, "Oh, that one looks good," and then, like, 6 months ago, I'm like, "Oh, I downloaded that one."
Yeah, you completely forget it. It must be very easy to do.
Yeah. "You've already purchased this." "Oh, wow." Are there any last questions from the audience before I ask Janice the last question of the day? So I will ask. Well, we're waiting to see if there's any last minute questions. So one question I'll ask. So, do you have any special plans to celebrate the release of your book today?
Well, I've And nothing special today. It's 7 in the evening here, so and I'm not really someone who goes out late because I get up so early. So I've no plans to actually celebrate today, but I'm sure we'll do something at the weekend because I've had these two book launches very close to each other.
Mhm.
I mean, Alberton Angels launched on Thursday, and now this launch here on Tuesday. So it's been non-stop launches, and I need to celebrate them both. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think I'll probably go out to dinner and chill out at the weekend
Sounds
when both
wonderful.
launches are launched.
So my final question, so we have no other questions from the audience that I can see. Let me double check here. Okay, yep, we no more questions here. So if heaven exists, what would you like to hear when you cross over?
I would like to hear any music from the 1970s. I don't mind what. I don't mind if it's rock or disco. I don't mind. As long as it's from the 1970s, that'll be my happy place.
I imagine a disco room
Disco,
hall
yeah.
in heaven. It sounds so much fun.
You must get some strange answers to that one.
I do, but it's always a fun question to ask, and I can't take any credit for it. It comes from James Lipton, who did the Inside of the Actors Studio. He always asks a set of like this or that questions at the end of his interviews, and so I always that's was one of my favorite questions to see how actors replied to that question because everybody has a different response and a feeling and a thought about it, and
Uh-huh.
it's always wonderful way to learn about people. So. You're not the first person to say music, though. Somebody had a very specific song, but that's the first time I've heard specifically the 1970s.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah.
So thank you for your time today, Janice. Congratulations on the release of your books, both in the UK and here. We're looking forward to the next book when it comes out, and maybe we can chat again then.
Oh, I'd love to. It's been absolutely wonderful chatting with you, and thank you everyone for tuning in and asking questions. It's been a joy. Celebrate the launch with me. It's been wonderful.
Yes, yes, we will. So we have copies of the Peel in stock, and we will. These are the Twyford codes coming in this week. It probably arrived today in a box. So if you want either one of them, you can head to our website, swampfoxbookstore.com, and place your order. You can do pickup, we can do local delivery, and we also ship. So thank you again, Janice. We look forward to talking to you again soon, and have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.